Welcome to all. Bienvenidos a todas. My name is Dina Fidas without an equal. Mi nombre es Dina Fidas without an equal. Mi pronombre es ella. My pronoun is she, her. And today we are going to speak a little bit of Spanish and a little bit of English. And we're a small enough group. We're a bilingual group. So if there's anything that you would like us to pause and quickly explain the gist, we can. A gentle reminder to keep your own computer on mute, and we will also have time for some discussion and interaction. I think some other colleagues will join. It's close to the end of the workday here in the United States on the East Coast, so I think some people will watch the recording of this. Well, welcome. We are so thrilled to have you here, because we are talking about a brand new project that we launched this summer. We launched it in partnership out and equal with the longest running LGBT Chamber of Commerce in Argentina. And the chamber, as well as their founders, Pablo and Gustavo, who you'll hear from momentarily, have also run the largest LGBT plus business and tourism conference on the continent. They have over a decade of experience working with governmental agencies, with small, mid, and large businesses. They also work strategically with Pride Connection, which has partnerships inclusive of American Airlines, SAP, and a host of other major employers in country. So without further ado, I'm going to first introduce our partners from the LGBT plus Chamber of Commerce in Argentina. And with that, I'm going to ask my colleague CV Viverito to switch to our video of them. Thank you.
Hola, mi nombre es Pablo de Luca y estoy aquí hoy con ustedes representando a CCGLAR, que es la Cámara de Comercio LGBT de Argentina. Antes de continuar, me gustaría compartir con ustedes pantalla. Vamos a compartir. A ver. Ahora sí. Bueno, desde hace algo más de una década trabajamos junto a empresas, junto a profesionales y a emprendedores, y también junto a otras organizaciones, tanto públicas como privadas. Lo hacemos promoviendo la diversidad como valor y la inclusión LGBTIQ en el ámbito laboral corporativo. Hace unos 15 años atrás, en una de nuestras visitas a Estados Unidos, observamos que también dentro de la comunidad LGBTIQ existían y se creaban organizaciones para visibilizar nuestra comunidad, también desde el campo de los negocios y a través de la inclusión en el ámbito laboral. En nuestros inicios fuimos solo un puñado de personas representando a empresas pequeñas, a empresas medianas y grandes, y que desde el sector del turismo y la hospitalidad comenzamos a organizarnos y a trabajar de manera cooperativa, intentando generar sinergias que nos permitieran mejorar nuestros negocios. Y a la vez ser de alguna manera un puente entre empresas, profesionales, emprendedores, personas LGBT y sus aliados, con nuestra comunidad LGBT local, regional, y un poco más adelante también internacionalmente. En pocos años esta iniciativa, que como les decía, nació más enfocada en el sector de la hospitalidad, se vio fortalecida con la conformación formal de nuestra entidad. Algo que hicimos de la mano del sector público, con quien estábamos ya trabajando bastante fuertemente, y del sector privado inclusive con algunas reconocidas organizaciones LGBTIQ de los Estados Unidos. Fuimos la primera Cámara de Comercio LGBT en América Latina y asistimos a la creación de numerosas entidades similares en algunos de los países de nuestra región. Nuestro foco se amplió y hoy seguimos trabajando en esas dos grandes ramas de trabajo. La primera, que es la inclusión laboral LGBTIQ en el ámbito corporativo a nivel federal en nuestro país. Y la segunda, el trabajo colectivo y también federal junto a las 23 provincias argentinas y al sector público de la Administración Nacional. Entre las actividades a las que nuestra Cámara se dedica, una muy importante es la de la capacitación, la formación profesional y la sensibilización para promover espacios laborales diversos y seguros con las personas de nuestra comunidad. En estos 15 años 15 años de trabajo a lo largo y a lo ancho de la República Argentina, reconocimos la necesidad de hacer más y de asociarnos con una organización global. La idea es apoyar las realidades cotidianas de las empresas argentinas y latinoamericanas que querían y que quieren ser más inclusivas. Así que iniciamos una asociación natural con Habla Equal para apoyar a esas empresas de nuestra región, para adoptar mejores prácticas y, lo que es más importante aún, acercarles una herramienta que les permita autoevaluar sus progresos. Hemos venido trabajando en América Latina durante muchos años, junto a Dina Fidas, con quien compartimos muchos proyectos y trabajos en conjunto, y ahora también junto a CB Viverito y a todo el equipo de Out and Equal, quienes en poco tiempo más nos van a acompañar en Buenos Aires, en el evento que anualmente organizamos desde hace ya unos 15 años. Esta tarea la realizamos de la mano de asociados, de profesionales y en especial de Out and Equal, una organización global junto a quienes diseñamos herramientas y trainings para nuestros asociados y para otras empresas y para otras organizaciones. Ya lanzamos el primer conjunto de herramientas de lenguaje inclusivo que apoya a trabajadoras y trabajadores, especialmente de la comunidad trans y personas no binarias en nuestra región. Cuando hicimos el lanzamiento oficial de esa primera guía, fueron más de 500 las personas, los profesionales, los emprendedores que se unieron a la sesión. Pudimos también reconocer que estábamos cumpliendo con una necesidad profunda de que las empresas tienen de crecer y de evolucionar para satisfacer a su organización y al mercado de hoy. Desde entonces ya hemos traducido varias herramientas para empresas más y estamos verdaderamente agradecidos de poder presentar a Habla Equal y a sus asociados en Buenos Aires en noviembre próximo en G-Network 360. Desde 2007 organizamos en Buenos Aires, en nuestra ciudad, la Conferencia Internacional sobre Liderazgo, Diversidad e Inclusión, G-Network 360, uno de los eventos de referencia en América Latina, que este año se va a celebrar nuevamente en Alvear Palace Hotel entre el 16 y el 19 de noviembre. Cada año recibimos a casi 2.000 representantes de empresas y de organizaciones de 19 países. Y vienen a escuchar y vienen a aprender de sus casi 50 conferencistas, con 3 días completos de actividades, con ejes temáticos diferentes y eventos en los que el networking es también un gran protagonismo. Otra de las actividades que tiene como foco nuestra entidad es la investigación. Y llevamos realizados numerosos estudios de mercado, tanto en Argentina y en América Latina, algunos de ellos hechos por CCGLAR, otros hechos junto a reconocidos o reconocidas consultoras de nuestro país, pero también de América Latina y de los Estados Unidos. Creamos hace 4 años la Red Federal LGBT, en la que representantes del sector público y del sector privado interactúan en todo nuestro país, visibilizando las 23 provincias y el Distrito Federal y generando estrategias comunes a todas ellas. Y un ejemplo del trabajo que pudimos llevar adelante junto a la Red Federal LGBT que coordinamos desde esta Cámara es la implementación del Programa Federal LGBT 2021. Comenzamos, como les contaba, en el sector del turismo y la hospitalidad, pero en un minuto más les voy a contar cómo estamos ya haciendo extensivo este proyecto a otros sectores de nuestra economía. Este plan incluyó una primera etapa de capacitaciones virtuales diseñadas por nuestra Cámara junto a la Oficina de Turismo de Argentina en cada una de las 23 provincias y en el Distrito Federal, aquí en la ciudad de Buenos Aires. También incluyó la implementación de un sello de compromiso con la inclusión LGBTIQ. Se llamó Todes Bienvenides. La creación de un directorio federal de prestadores inclusivos o diversos del sector y la programación durante este segundo semestre que todavía estamos transitando, de un ciclo de talleres presenciales que obviamente ajustamos a la evolución favorable que tiene la pandemia actualmente en la Argentina. Como etapa final y también junto al sector público, la promoción nacional, regional y también internacional del trabajo y de la oferta de todos estos emprendedores y profesionales, que luego de relevar llegamos a, como les decía, más de 1.000 inscriptos que aplicaron. Estamos comenzando ahora con una iniciativa más ambiciosa, que es la de expandir este proyecto a otros sectores en nuestro país. Y elegimos como nuestro aliado estratégico a una organización, Out and Equal, con quienes trabajamos desde hace algunos años, también en una serie de talleres virtuales de sensibilización, de capacitación, en el desarrollo de guías de buenas prácticas y en herramientas para grupos de recursos LGBTIQ en las empresas. Y también desarrollamos un nuevo sello de compromiso con la generación de espacios seguros para las personas LGBTIQ y comprometidos con la diversidad y con la inclusión. Este sello se llama Argentina, Compromiso, Inclusión LGBTIQ. Y van a poder aplicar las empresas y los emprendedores que vamos relevando en cada una de nuestras actividades en toda la Argentina. Por último, y también junto a Out and Equal, estamos trabajando en el desarrollo de una plataforma de autoevaluación que le va a permitir a las empresas medir su progreso en cuestiones de diversidad, de equidad e inclusión. Y al mismo tiempo creando nuestro primer directorio de proveedores diversos de la Argentina, que va a permitir que hagamos eso que ya está un poco en el ADN desde el día 1 de nuestra entidad, que es transformarnos en puentes entre emprendedores, empresas y nuestra comunidad LGBTIQ. Los primeros resultados de esta iniciativa se van a presentar desde CCGLAR y junto a quienes van a visitarnos de Out and Equal en el evento anual, en la edición 14 de G-Network 360, que va a ocurrir del 16 al 19 de noviembre, de manera presencial y también híbrida, en Alvear Palace Hotel de la ciudad de Buenos Aires. Nuestro objetivo en común es continuar posicionando a la Argentina en el mapa global como un mercado de clase mundial en temas de inclusión LGBTIQ, tanto en los mercados de trabajo, en los espacios de trabajo, pero también mucho más allá. De verdad, muchas gracias por el tiempo que nos permitieron acompañarlos. Quedamos a disposición de todas y todos ustedes en todo momento. Muchas gracias una vez más.
Super. Thank you so much to Pablo and Gustavo, his partner in life and in work, who was not in the video, but works very hard on that. I recognize that a few people on the call may not be bilingual, so I'm going to very briefly summarize that presentation, very briefly, to say that Pablo and Gustavo, the work that they have done has had a multiplier effect in Argentina. They have brought in businesses anchored first in the tourism business, but really expanded to this huge conference that now includes best practices, resources for Argentinian employers, expanded networking sessions. And for these reasons, we have selected them, and it's been mutual that we launched this partnership to bridge what our multinational partners have asked for in country and what the local knowledge is about how to take some of these global trends in LGBT+ inclusion and apply them locally, and also have the local knowledge. Many of you may know that Argentina has led in Latin America when it comes to legal changes, policy changes for the LGBT+ community. I did put in the chat box, CV Viverito, my colleague, who you'll hear from in a little bit, and I are 99% sure we will be in Buenos Aires. That conference is November 16th to 19th. We'll put another link in the chat box, but we will be there and joining hundreds of other leaders to talk about everything from how we bounce back after the pandemic to best practices in LGBT+ inclusion. So very brief synopsis of what you just saw. And now with great pleasure, I'm going to introduce somebody who has meant a lot to me, Viviana Nicola. She has spent decades with American Airlines, although you would not guess decades by looking at her beautiful face. And she is an extraordinary ally. She's an extraordinary ally for the LGBT+ community, and her influence goes well beyond Argentina. She has brought in and inspired people from, wonderful, I see people in the chat box who know her well. She has brought in friends and allies from Peru, from Miami, from all around the world, frankly. And we are so, so fortunate to have her here to talk to us about how she relates to the topic of LGBT inclusion, being based in Argentina, but also because of her job with American Airlines, really quite literally having a global perspective. When we say that the 40,000 foot feet, that is Viviana, because she is flying often, looking down on the rest of us and really showering us with her joy, her kindness, and her inspiration. So gracias, Viviana. Thank you so much for being here. And I hand the stage to you.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry. Thank you so much for your beautiful and sweet words. And I cannot be more thankful with you and CV. The same to the both of you. And yes, let's start like saying, like most of you know me. I'm gonna go in English because there are a lot of people that probably will connect later, and but they don't speak Spanish. But I'm gonna go from English to Spanish all the way, so don't worry. So again, I'm Viviana Nicola. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And okay, I'm going to take notes because before I give you these numbers, like 5 years, 10, 20, 30, that's the truth. 30 years working for American Airlines, going through many different positions like flight attendant, purser. For those who are not in the airline business, purser is the one who is in charge and give you those and deliver those sweet announcements when you are on board. Trainer, flight service manager, acting base manager, you know. But there's a role that I'm holding right now that that happened 3 years ago. That is the role of the president of the EBRG Pride for Argentina. It was again 3 years ago when my HR called me and it goes like, yes, I was so interested, but there was a lot of questions of researching, getting the right people, volunteer people, because this is something we should discuss later, probably if we have time. Volunteer people. This is a plus of volunteer energy and people who really is willing to make a change and act. And I've been always curious about all the areas that involved behind the scenes before we put that airplane in the sky, right? And because we're not only transporting passengers, but carrying life stories. Probably a story like mine. And I will start by telling this about me that probably you don't know, but back in 2008, I will never forget that afternoon landing in China, and all of a sudden I heard the captain saying for the first time, "Welcome to Shanghai, Juan in Shanghai," and it goes like, oh wow! I felt like kind of Scarlett Johansson in Lost in Translation. I was like that feeling of hopeless and desperate to get someone to connect or to communicate. And I hope I mean, this story of me has a reason, so I hope you understand what I'm trying to explain. The feeling of loneliness and hopeless and desperate because who am I going to communicate? Because back in 2008, no one speaks English. I mean, most of them, they don't speak, of the Chinese population don't speak English. So, but I also start like understand that when the hours goes by, that it's gonna be more tough, more difficult if I don't try to say at least my name or hola, hi. So it was really challenging, and I would never forget the first time I was able to finally do so. I say, ni hao, wo chao, wei wei. That is, hi, I'm Viviana in Chinese. Hola, soy Viviana. And such a simple task, but also a challenging goal, right? That was the first feeling that I forgot to mention was that I felt like an alien in Shanghai. But let me tell you, I will never forget when I could say, "Wo Chao Wei Wei, yo soy Viviana." That was the end of the alien and was the beginning of the ally. I didn't know that I was an ally since I was born, since I was a kid. But that was the beginning of the feeling of ally. Because also I changed the perspective. It was not about me anymore. It was now I'm able to communicate. So I was able to see what happens. I start the university there, the school there, meeting all these kids from the LGBTQ, all scared to death. And for any reason, it was like a magic vibe. And they're coming to me and telling me stories. And it was a before and after in my life. So let me tell you what means an ally. What for me means being an ally. It's being supportive to my friends and loved ones. It's like such a very simple thing, right? But you need to really developing a true understanding of how the world views and treats them. It may sound obvious again, but to learn, we need to be willing and open to truly listen, ask questions respectfully, embrace our difference, not only embrace, but accept them. So I start wondering how I'm going to do this in my work. American is creating a workplace for all of us. Inclusion and diversity is a way of life for us. It sounds like easy. Every day, our team members work to make the company a place where people of all generations, races, ethnicities, genders, sexual orientations, gender identity, disabilities, religions, affiliations, and backgrounds feel welcome and valued. And I'm going to read this because this is something that our CEO expressed. And he says, "We are working to restore our company as the greatest airline in the world." So pay attention to his words. And we can only do that with employees that are as diverse as the customers we serve. So we must work to recruit, develop, retain, and engage the very best people, those with unique perspectives and ways of thinking. Isn't that great? Those are his words. So I really took advantage of his words because he's giving me all the tools. He's giving me the chance to be creative, to be myself. So we, as American Airlines, we have so many recognitions like Diversity Best Practices Inclusion Index, which honors global top companies for their inclusion and diversity efforts. So I goes like, wow, that's kind of a lot for me. I say, okay, what are we gonna do meanwhile in Latin America? Of course, we need to do our part. And of course in Argentina. So we had to do our part, and that when we started to research and find allies outside the company, and that's when I found and I met Pablo and Gustavo from the Chamber of Commerce, and believe me, that was the kickoff. That was the kickoff. And we also start like with Pride Connection. Many of the companies, when we started, we were only 14 companies. Now we are more than 60 after our second summit. So we are the only airline in Argentina to be an active member because we belong to the events committee, and we're organizing multiple events and actions to make it work. And we are the only airline in Argentina to be part of this Pride Connection, which is awesome because most of the companies that we have in our unequal, I know them, and they also be like yesterday I've been with Paula, and she's with me in events as well, and she's from Accenture, and she was one of the panelists. So as you mentioned, Dina, it's a question of paying attention and be connecting and get connecting with people who really wants to make things happen. So what else? During the pandemic, we were so ready for beautiful things. We have so many activities, and the pandemic came and make a pause in our lives, in the world. And as flight service, we remained for 8 months at our places. So we were like, what am I gonna do? I said, I cannot be disengaged of all my people. I mean, especially in Latin America. So we create this virtual space called Galley Talks. And we have Optum, she was a psychologist, and we have like a TV show every single day, supporting our colleagues. We were right there. You can imagine. I mean, sometimes we have like 500 people. They just wanted to be connected because they were lonely. And it was a very responsible task, because we had that therapist. It was not only opinion or Galley Talk, even though the name was Galley Talk. I mean, the 4 countries of Latin America, they could recognize what Galley Talk means. Is, well, I should go there and let's see what's going on. And we didn't, of course, have the answers, but we were right there for each other. And that's the key. So that was amazing. That was an amazing thing during the lockdown. Well, what else? Like, here I am. I feel very comfortable. That's why I'm not gonna say that I'm not reading, because there are so many things I'd like to share with you that I don't want to take all your afternoon. We also have this commitment with the community, and this definitely break my heart, because Casa Manu is a non-profit organization located in Buenos Aires, and we sponsorship Casa Manu. That provides a home for children whose mothers are HIV positive. And as an example of this, we celebrated Children's Day together with the Intercontinental Hotel and Manuel Tienda León Transportation, 2 outstanding allies. That was one of the most rewarded activities we've had lately. It was back in August. And I'll be the whole afternoon sharing with you those images of the kids, and it's so rewarding, so beautiful. And this is another thing that we can do. That's why we are part of the solution. We are not a problem as a community, in terms of talking about how I see the job in the future. Definitely we are part of the solution. There's so many things to do. And in terms of, I think that partnerships are essential to advocate LGBTQ+ rights. So that's the reason why I'm thrilled with this latest announcement of our Ahora and Equal and the Chamber of Commerce signing the partnership and finally coming down to Argentina. Because again, we need people like Dina, like CV, like Pablo, like Gustavo, like all of you to make things happen. And definitely I cannot be more proud and thankful with this partnership. So by saying this, that probably is not, I want you to know this is not something new. I mean, I've been all these days, for the last 2 days, listening all these webinars and great speakers, famous people from the government, people just like me. And we are all in the same, page. In a way or the other, we are all in the same page. We want people to be themselves. We want people to speak up. We want to change the world. Probably we're not going to be able to see the results, but we are doing our part. So if after this webinar, because I know there's a variety of options, we're sneaking from one room, from the virtual room to the other. If I can inspire one of you, and if you send me a little message and you tell me, hey, Bibi, you know what? There's something I would like to share with you. I have this idea. Just count on me, because for sure we're going to find out how to put your idea in action. This is exactly what we need in this world. And also it's very challenging because this is a word, and I love this, in a world that wants us to walk around as representatives of ourselves. just listen to this, in a world that want us to walk around as representatives of ourselves, en un mundo que está esperando una versión de nosotros. Being yourself can be a revolutionary act. Ser vos mismo puede ser un acto súper revolucionario. Así que esa frase a mí me puede, that really inspires me. But I asked CV and Gina if I may share a picture of me, and that would be my wrap up. Thank you. And thank you, CV. Every single time that I open my phone, I have that picture. That is my grandma Maria, and that is me. She homemade that costume for me is as a butterfly, as you can see, costume. I was 7 years old. I will never forget. That was my second home that my father built. And I wasn't sure, but she gave me wings. And I didn't know those wings, every single time that I open my phones, I will always be that kid. I will always be that kid. I'm still that kid, that girl. And but every single time I open my phone, that remembers me. That those wings that I didn't know back then are the wings that give me the strong to help, to motivate, to make things happen, to speak loud. And at the end of the day, with those wings, you are why we fly, right? So thank you both. And I hope you enjoy my words. I hope my words inspire. I hope to see you in Buenos Aires, and I'd like to receive messages. Just speak up. I'm right there listening. I'm ready to change the world.
Oh, I'm going to be emotional, Vivi. Thank you so much. Thank you from my heart. Thank you so much. And I have a belief that when we see, if we're lucky enough to see photographs of people we care about when they're little kids, that the little light that they bring into the world is apparent. And it's absolutely apparent with that photo of you and your blessed grandmother. How wonderful. And thank you. It's very generous to share this with all of us. And some people bring light. They illuminate the room wherever they go. They bring light to wherever they go. And I think everybody on this call knows that, Vivi, you are one of those people. You are extraordinary. So thank you so much. And to the point of living your truth, bringing light to the world, and leadership, I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague, CV Viverito. CV, hi, Pepe. Our dear friend Pepe Estrada just joined. Hi, Pepe. We're a small closed group, so you're welcome to put your cameras on, whatever is comfortable. CV Viverito heads our global work, our regional program work, and the Global Hub. CV has had a background that includes nearly every major LGBT+ organization in the United States, the Victory Fund, the Human Rights Campaign. You can find photos of them from Albania to South America, changing the world. They are trilingual. They speak English, Portuguese, and Spanish fluently. And more than anyone I've had the pleasure of working with or knowing, they educate people and bring them along, and they do the work themselves to communicate. They have mastered a third language, Portuguese, so that it strengthens our work in Brazil, and they have led a whole set of resources on non-binary inclusion, one of which was just published in a book in the last 2 weeks. So thank you, CV. CV is going to talk to us about the first resource that we published, under this partnership with the LGBT Chamber in Argentina. Thank you, CV.
Well, thank you, Dina, for that very, very warm introduction. And a huge thank you to you as well, Viviana. Tough act to follow. That was incredible. Thank you for sharing your story. So I learned so much about you just in these 10 minutes, and your story speaks volumes to how each of us can tune in more to our ally journey and find points of our life that then guide us towards, greater allyship, empathy, and understanding, and just openness. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your vulnerability and you sharing that. And of course, I know Pablo and Gustavo are not with us now, but I thank them as well for sending in that video. It's wonderful to learn more about, that's my dog, sorry. This is life now, about how these partnerships work and why they're so important. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. I want to chat with you a little bit about, as Dina mentioned, one of our first resources that we put out in this partnership. But first, I'd like to just set the context a little bit. So this is the most recent update. I'll get to this in 1 second. But this doesn't come in a vacuum. So thinking about Argentina, progress has been mounting over the past years. Of course, with that comes backlash, as always. But for example, last year, almost exactly last year, actually in September, the president signed a necessity and urgency decree that established a 1% employment quota for trans and travesti people in the national public sector, which really speaks to the increasing commitment to economic inclusion. And now just months ago, super exciting, in July 21st, Argentina's president announced this new option on the national identity document, DNA, for non-binary people. And that makes them actually the first country in Latin America to allow gender neutral markers on your ID. Specifically, you can have an X on your gender marker. So instead of the M or the F, you can put an X. It's fantastic news. The president himself said, quote, "There are other identities besides man and woman that must be respected." So Argentina now joins over 10 other countries in this option, not the US. The US, you can do so in certain states, but it is not federal legislation yet. It also sets the tone for the region, especially with numerous mandates from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, calling its member states to protect and guarantee LGBTQ rights. And I might have forgotten part of my full intro because my dog needed attention, but I use they, them pronouns, or ella in Spanish, or ile in Portuguese. And so this would apply to me if I lived in Argentina. This is something that I could do in Argentina and not here. And I want to explain some of these photos before I get into our resource, because I promise this relates. The first photo here is the press conference where the president was announcing this. The second photo, and this is so interesting and important, is the president's child named Tani, who is non-binary. And so it really speaks to why visibility matters, why stories matter. We know that knowing someone who is X, in this case, who is non-binary, or hearing them story, it has the power to change hearts and minds. And that, I would imagine, is part of what happened here, along, of course, with all of the very hard work of the community. And the photo on the bottom is a good friend of Out and Equals as well. You may know them, Sasa Testa, a professor and activist who played a role in advocating for this legislation. So another thing, now getting into the resource that Dina was mentioning, that the president actually said, which wasn't necessarily expected, that it was going to take this layer of the approach to non-binary inclusion. What he said was, "El ideal va a ser cuando todos y todas seamos todes," or the ideal will be when the way to say everyone in the masculine or feminine will be the way to say everyone in neutral Spanish. So that brings me to one of the resources. And of course, Pablo mentioned this in his message to all of us. We heard this conversation from a lot of our partners. It's a big question that we get at Out and Equal and at CCGLAR, and probably within all of your companies as well on this call, is part of non-binary inclusion is going to be naturally what do we do with a language that's so binary, such as Spanish or Portuguese? There are ways to get around that, of course, and that is inclusive Spanish and or neutral Spanish, which are just a little bit different, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But I want to go over, of course, why this is so important. The future of work is fluid. El futuro del lugar de trabajo es fluido. And so what are we doing about that? Language plays a big role. And I'll tell you a personal note, why neutral language matters to me. You know, it's hard to explain the feeling or the anxiety that I can get sometimes. It's kind of like a spiral brain when somebody uses binary language to refer to me. You know, the anxiety gremlin in my brain just tells me, oh, they see you as a woman. That's how they're thinking of you throughout this whole conversation. Now, how am I going to proceed in this interaction? Thinking that this person doesn't understand who I am. And so can you imagine how that might affect the work performance of a person at work, you know, let alone their general well-being? And I want to caveat, I totally understand that we have to make space for folks to learn neutral language, inclusive language, neutral pronouns. It's a huge change. And especially in Spanish, it affects like almost every word you say if you're going to make Spanish neutral. So it's a mental workout. And I understand that. And that is why just the effort of making a little correction if you mess up or changing next time, that makes, I can't even tell you the biggest difference. And so it's a journey to allyship. It's not about the mistakes, it's what you do with them, right? How you can use them as reminders to propel yourself forward and do better next time. And so this guide, our efforts around this are not without complete understanding of that journey. You're not expecting everyone to just suddenly start speaking neutral Spanish all the time. That's really difficult. It's a big change. But as was said in one of our sessions earlier, actually, let's focus on the people that would really like to be treated with that language and making effort to do that. So I won't take up too much more of your time, and I will put the link to download this guide in the chat. But just to briefly walk you through it before I pass it to Dina. As I was mentioning, I'll get a little bit bilingual here, so please feel free to ask questions in the chat if I need to explain anything better. But we have inclusive language and neutral language. So inclusive language pretty much avoids the use of binary gender in Spanish. So instead of saying buenos días a todos y todas, or simplemente a todos, you could say buenos días equipo, right? That avoids needing to use any type of binary for people that don't identify within the binary. And here, the rest of the example is here on this page. You know, las personas a las que hemos invitado, which is a little bit longer, but a little bit better than saying los invitados, because maybe some of them are not men or don't identify within the binary. Then there's neutral Spanish, which basically, when presented with a word that has either an O, masculine, or an A, feminine ending, you can change it to an E, and that makes it neutral. So, hola a todos, bienvenides, espero que estén listes, etc., ¿no? Nuestros ponentes invitados llegarán al mediodía. So again, it definitely takes practice, but it is such an important symbol of recognition for someone who does not identify as strictly as a man or a woman, like myself. And you can find out so much more information around how to do this in the guide. There's really interesting practical tips and explanations. Here's some other examples. As I mentioned earlier, my pronoun in Spanish is ella instead of él or ella, no? It makes it neutral. So here's some good examples of how to use that and how adjectives would change. So I'm tranquile, I'm not tranquila or tranquilo, but I'm also feliz. That word doesn't happen to change in Spanish, right? So It depends. And I just want to make a brief note because I heard this on a couple of our other calls. Every now and then I'll get someone saying, hey, this is awesome. It's very cool to see a movement to change language and to open up space and make it more inclusive. But the Real Academia Española, or the Royal Spanish Academy, it doesn't recognize ella as a pronoun. It doesn't recognize todes as an official word. And going back to one of the people on one of the images here, Sasa Testa, who is inspirational, is a Castellano, is a professor of Castellano, so has a recognized authority on the language, makes a really interesting point. The Real Academia Española is an institution of linguistics and should recognize linguistics as its own science. Of course, the Real Academia has made countless updates to its articles over time. Therefore, it clearly recognizes that language evolves and changes over time based on a community of speakers. We are not speaking the same Spanish now as we were 500 years ago. And clearly the Real Academia did not walk around telling us all to start changing. Okay, it's been 100 years, change. No, what happened was a community of speakers naturally evolved the language based on the needs, based on the changing world around them. So that's all that's happening now. The Real Academia hasn't caught up, which is a shame, but I imagine they will over time. And I see someone in the chat box asking a simple question. Exactly, Pepe. It's referring to people like myself, for example, who do not identify as a man or a woman. There's no need to change the gender of an object because that object has no gender. So it's still la mesa. It's still, you know, la botella, la camisa. But for myself, I no soy una mujer. No, entonces I wouldn't be animada. I'm una persona no binaria. I'm a non-binary person, so I'm animade. So I hope that makes sense. But I'm gonna, with the sake of time, I will pause and I will hand it back to Dina. But I would absolutely love to answer any of your questions around this when we leave some time for Q&A. So thank you. And I'm gonna pass it back to Dina to tell us a little bit more about some of the exciting things that we have coming up and a little bit more in-depth information about this exciting partnership. So thank you.
Thank you so much, CV. And one thing I'm going to underscore, because obviously CV is speaking like me from Washington, DC, the movement to make Spanish more inclusive is not from the United States. I just want to underscore that one more time. It is coming largely from younger people in South America. I see you, Vivi, nodding your head. We are seeing this as a global phenomenon. We're also seeing it in Portuguese. With our deep work in Brazil. But there is alignment globally, and hopefully if you didn't get to see it earlier today, you can watch it again. We had an incredible panel called Non-Binary in 4 Languages earlier at Summit that CV moderated. Thank you, and in China as well, exactly. More than any other topic this year, we've heard that people want information on non-binary and trans inclusion. We have just a little less than 10 minutes. So you know what, CV, I'd like to go really quickly through these slides because I just want to leave people with a fundamental understanding of what we're doing. So could I ask you to click through quickly? Super, we can get, there we go. So very briefly, and I put a link in the chat that describes our partnership again. We are, as a global community of workplace advocates, at any given moment, legal changes are happening, such as the gender marker change. There's an evolution in the global market. An employee at Walmart, I see my dear friend Pepe, who has been in Mexico and is used to inclusion there, has, expects this of their employer, moves to Chile or Argentina, where actually had been working with Walmart in Chile. They were doing extraordinary work on transgender inclusion. And so you have a global marketplace and a global talent base that expects LGBT+ inclusion, but we need to reinforce that at the local level. So we can go to the next one, CV. So some of you may know my history. I was at the Human Rights Campaign for about 12 years. And while I was there, I ran the Corporate Equality Index and traveled around Latin America and set up a program called Equidad. Equidad began in Mexico, and then we started it in Chile. This was a program intended to establish some foundational policies and practices, largely for local companies. I think many more multinationals opted into the program. That's great. But they really were based on foundational things like non-discrimination policies, having an employee resource group, and some outside engagement. That's all wonderful. And there's definitely a context where that is quite helpful. What I would argue right now, especially in Argentina, Argentina has had such sweeping change that very few workplaces there are starting from square one. So I argue we need to go from the roadmap, two-dimensional roadmap, to GPS. What's the difference between a roadmap to GPS? GPS is three-dimensional. We can see what's ahead, we can see shortcuts, we can see the longer, more scenic route. But that is really what we are doing with Pablo and Gustavo with this new program. And we are deliberately not branding this an index. This is not a stamp to just say, okay, you're good, you did these three things. This is an overall toolkit for companies, small, medium, and large, businesses, small, medium, and large, to be more equitable, more inclusive, and to foster a culture of belonging. So CV, we'll go to the next one. And so how do we do this? How do we support taking the global and making it local or glocal? Let's go to the next one. I'm watching time and I want to make sure we have at least a few minutes. We know that sustainable workplace change takes three key elements. Number one, the foundational policies, benefits, and protocols. Do you have the non-discrimination statement? Do you have gender transition guidelines? Do you have domestic partner benefits? All of that is very important. Then the practices for culture change. One of the practices that we are all getting used to is giving our pronouns in a meeting, in our email addresses, on our badges. Walmart famously rolled out some pronoun pins here in the US. American Airlines, I believe, now has a gender inclusive greeting. It's not necessarily ladies and gentlemen. But what we know from a decade of research is you can have all the right policies, all the right practices, but if it's not having the intended effect, there's going to be that gap. And so we knew that there needed to be a new approach here to give it that dimension where people are actually evaluating their own workplace. So it's not just checking a box, but is this having the intended effect? And so CV, you can, if you could go to the next one, please. Super. So what are we releasing in November? So this November, at the G Network conference in November 16th in Buenos Aires, we are releasing the toolkit. And here's one example of what we mean, bringing this to life. From the gender identity protections policy, then we have a questionnaire that companies can use, businesses can use, about whether or not pronouns are socialized. Do you have gender transition or non-binary inclusion guidelines in place, and more? But then, and this is what I'm particularly excited about because I know that this is where the gap is, a self-evaluation form for employees to say, how often do people name their pronouns in meetings? How comfortable are you? Or would you guess a colleague would be telling human resources about a name and gender marker change? Now, we are not going to publicize the results of the self-evaluation. No company wants that. We want to give companies the tools that they need to become more inclusive. And all of this will be both in English and in Spanish. We know that some of these will be adopted by multinationals and some will be adopted by Argentinian businesses that are local or regional. And so that's the distinction we're talking about. We don't just want to ask the same question over and over again. Do you have this policy in place? We know the policy is in place. We know that the gaps happen in the day-to-day practice. And so CV, I hope I'm saving just a few minutes here for some question and answer. You can just go to the very last slide. Again, we are so looking forward to being in Buenos Aires. For those of you not in Argentina right now, you should know Argentina is one of the few countries that has nearly been able to eliminate its COVID protocols because the rates are so low. So the country itself is in incredibly good shape with respect to the pandemic. And that's why we're thinking that all of us can indeed descend on Buenos Aires. So I know that that was very rapid. I can stay on an extra 5 minutes, and then I have to actually go run one of the networking sessions, but I wanted to at least give you a sense of what we are doing in the context of this partnership. Excellent. So I'll just share that what Pepe put in the chat box from Walmart is that the associates are able to use a self-service tool to change their names and add pronouns. That's brilliant, so that they don't need to go to human resources for that, but actually can opt in. Excellent. There's a question here. This is a lively debate in the United States about Latinx or Latine. I don't know who wants to take that question. I may offer some context, not to judge the decision here, but some context. Latinx as a term really, I think, became the most prominent it ever had been in the context of the Pulse massacre. So the tragedy in Orlando. This was an LGBT club. Orlando has one of the highest or the most Puerto Ricans living in the greater Orlando area. And so Pulse was known not just as an LGBT space, but a Puerto Rican space. And it was really in that context that as the news was describing this as this horrific crime against LGBT people, the community was saying, no, we're not just LGBT. We don't want to be whitewashed. We are Puerto Rican, we are Latinx. And that's really when I started to see Latinx the most in the press. And that X was an attempt to make the term gender neutral. For years in the United States, there was some evolution to say, and the Latina community, so masculine and feminine. Then the X came to sort of make it even more gender inclusive. At the same time, there are plenty of people who are from Latin America who do not like Latinx, that it rings of a sort of United States attempt at changing the language. And language is contested, as I think we're talking about on this call. But I don't know that there's one right answer. I think it's about context. And I think whenever in doubt, the way that someone describes themselves is what to respect. So if someone says, I'm a proud Latina trans woman, say, wonderful. Refer to that person as a proud Latina trans woman. If someone says, my community, the Latinx community, the Latinx community. And Pepe, I want to see you just added something in here. Okay, the US Hispanic and Latino associates elected to use Latinx. But CV, do you happen to know, are we starting to see more Latine in the States or anywhere else?
It's such a good question. And to echo your point, and thank you for asking this question, there's no wrong word and right word at all. And it certainly wouldn't be for us to say, or for any one person to say. The one thing that you'll hear though, is that when you put an X at the end of the word, it does make it a little more difficult to pronounce, although you can just elect how you'd like to pronounce the X. However, for folks that use AI software to read or to listen to a transcript, unfortunately, that software is not going to pronounce the X. And that's the software's problem, not our problem. But the use of the E can be pronounced. So for folks that use that software, they're able to hear a full word, Latine, instead of a kind of a jumbled word with the AI trying to read a word with an X at the end. So that's another sort of accessibility aspect of this conversation.
Okay, super. Thank you so much. Well, you all may want to stay on for a little bit longer, which you may in this Zoom. I have to go to the green room for the networking session that I'm leading, which I hope you will join. It is in 27 minutes. We're going to look at research from the IBM Global Jam that we did and how it relates to a profile of LGBT+ leadership. I want to thank you all, especially Viviana. The heart that you put into this is extraordinary. I cannot wait to be with everybody in Buenos Aires. For those of you from other parts of Latin America, this is one of many projects. We have done roundtables across Latin America. Our goal is to generate knowledge locally and disseminate around the world. And so we welcome your input, your feedback from wherever you are, and also happy to connect you with other allies in this, other Pride Connection chapters and other friends working in this space. So again, from my heart, thank you all for being here. Mwah. I cannot wait to be with you. And we are a small but mighty group working here on inclusion in Argentina, but we will grow and grow. So thank you so much. Thank you. Super. CV, do you want to close out while I go to the networking session if there's anything else?
Go network. We'll see you there.
Super. Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much,
I'm not the
everyone.
host. Am I not the host? Let's
No,
just
you're
make sure.
good.
Okay, super. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody.